He wasn't rich. He wasn't dressed fancy. Just a dad with paint on his shirt and love in his heart. But what happened inside that store exposed everything wrong with how people see others. It was supposed to be the kind of Saturday that reminded Darius Holt why he kept pushing through long weeks of exhaustion. The kind of day that made the endless painting jobs, late nights, and cheap takeout dinners worth it. He'd promised his little girl, Maya, that he would take her downtown to see the big jewelry store. The one with glass windows so clean they looked invisible. For weeks, she'd been talking about a tiny gold bracelet she saw there, one with a heart charm that caught the sunlight just right. So that morning, Darius woke up before sunrise, packed their old car with snacks, and told Maya to put on her favorite yellow dress. The dress was a little wrinkled, but she didn't care. She twirled around the kitchen while eating toast, asking if the store would let her try the bracelet on. Maybe, Darius said with a smile, brushing a curl from her forehead. But remember, Princess, we're just looking, all right? Maya nodded, serious for a moment, then asked, Daddy, do they let girls like me in? That question hit him right in the chest. He chuckled softly, trying to hide the sting in his heart. Of course, baby girl. Everyone's welcome if they're kind. But deep down, he wasn't sure he believed that. By the time they reached Lexington Jewelers in downtown Charleston, South Carolina, the afternoon sun had turned the glass storefront into a mirror. Darius parked his dusty old Nissan beside a row of spotless black SUVs. He looked down at his paint-stained boots, his faded work shirt, and sighed. Guess I could have changed, he muttered. Maya tilted her head, clutching her stuffed bunny. You look nice, Daddy. That made him smile. All right then, let's go. When the door opened, a soft chime rang, but the room went strangely quiet. The air smelled of perfume and new money. The floor gleamed, and every light seemed to spotlight their difference. Two women near the counter turned their heads. One of them whispered something and laughed under her breath. A man in a tailored suit looked Darius up and down like he'd just wandered into the wrong world. Still, Darius kept walking. His daughter was watching, and he wasn't going to let her see him flinch. They reached a display filled with children's jewelry, gold bracelets, silver pendants, tiny diamond studs. Maya's eyes went wide. That one, she said, pointing to the bracelet she'd been dreaming about. A young woman behind the counter, perfectly styled hair and glossy nails, looked at him without smiling. Can I help you, sir? She asked, her tone clipped. Yes, Darius replied, keeping his voice calm. We'd like to see that bracelet, the one with the heart charm. The woman hesitated. Her gaze moved from Maya's little hands to Darius's shirt, then back to his face. That piece starts at $1,200, she said flatly. Maybe you'd like to look at something more affordable? Her words hung in the air like smoke. Darius felt the heat rise in his face. He looked down at Maya, who didn't understand what had just been said. She just kept smiling, waiting to try it on. But Darius knew what it meant. He'd been in places like this before, places that looked at him and decided who he was before he even spoke. Still, he forced a polite smile. No problem, he said softly. Could we just see it, please? The saleswoman sighed as if it were a personal inconvenience, then disappeared to the back. Darius stood quietly, pretending not to notice the stares. He tightened his grip around Maya's hand, silently wishing he could shield her from all of it. But things were only going to get worse before they got better. The woman came back holding a small velvet tray as if it contained something sacred. She placed it on the counter between them, but her movements were sharp, impatient. This is the bracelet you asked for, she said. Darius leaned forward slightly, careful not to touch the glass. It's beautiful, he said quietly. Can she see it up close? The woman gave a stiff smile. I'll have to handle it myself, sir. Store policy. She turned the tray so that the gold bracelet caught the light. The tiny heart charm gleamed. Simple, elegant, perfect. Maya's eyes sparkled. She pressed her small hands against the glass and whispered, It's even prettier than I remember. That whisper made Darius's chest ache. He could almost see the moment. Her birthday morning, her face lighting up when she opened the box. He'd been saving for weeks, skipping lunch more often than not, just to make this happen. The woman cleared her throat. Would you like to know the price again, sir? No need, he said. I already heard you. A few feet away, another employee, a young man in a slim gray suit, snickered and leaned toward his coworker. Bet he just wants a picture of it, he murmured. Darius heard him. He didn't react. He'd learned long ago that silence could be its own kind of dignity, but Maya didn't miss the tension. She looked up at her father, confused. "Daddy, why are they looking at us funny?" He bent down and whispered, "Don't worry about them, baby. Just look at your bracelet." The young man's smirk grew wider. "Sir," he said loudly, "if you can't afford this item, we do have a clearance section in the back. Some of our customers prefer to start there." The store went quiet again. The two women browsing near the rings stopped pretending not to listen. The security guard near the door shifted his weight, arms crossed, eyes locked on Darius. For a second, Darius thought about walking out. His pride screamed for it. But then he looked down at Maya, her big brown eyes, her innocence, her excitement, and he knew he couldn't let her learn shame that young. He stood straighter. "We're fine here," he said firmly. "Could you tell me about the bracelet's size?" The woman hesitated. Her tone softened a little. "It's adjustable," she said, "for children between 3 and 6. Maya beamed. "That's me," she said proudly. The woman's lips twitched, but not into a smile. She carefully picked up the bracelet with a small pair of tongs and held it over the counter. "Please don't touch," she said when Maya reached forward. "I wasn't gonna," Maya said, pulling her hand back. Her voice was small, hurt. Something inside Darius cracked. He took a deep breath, his hand trembling slightly. "You don't have to talk to her like that," he said softly. The young man behind the counter let out a quiet laugh. "We just have to protect the merchandise, sir. You understand?" Darius turned his head slowly toward him. His voice stayed calm, but there was steel in it now. "Yeah," he said. "I understand a lot more than you think." The young man looked away, suddenly uncomfortable. The woman avoided eye contact. A minute passed in tense silence. Darius could feel the weight of the room pressing down on him. The stares, the whispers, the judgment. Every breath felt heavier. Finally, he exhaled, forcing a half smile toward Maya. "All right, sweetheart," he said gently. "Why don't we thank the nice lady and head out?" Maya's smile faded. "But Daddy, you said—" "I know," he said, picking her up. "We'll come back later, okay?" Her small arms wrapped around his neck. "Okay," she whispered. They turned to leave. The sound of his boots on the marble floor echoed in the silent room. The young man snorted quietly again, thinking no one heard. But someone did, and that someone was about to change everything. Just as Darius reached for the door, the young clerk couldn't resist one last jab. "Sir," he called out, pretending politeness, "you might want to check the kiosk down the street. They sell children's jewelry too. Plastic, but cute." The laughter that followed wasn't loud, but it was sharp. It sliced right through the air, right through Darius. He froze mid-step, shoulders tight. Maya looked around, puzzled. "Daddy, why are they laughing?" Darius's throat tightened. He swallowed hard and said, "They're just being silly, baby. Don't worry about it." He pushed the door open, but before they could leave, another voice stopped them. An older woman's voice, thin and edged with disdain. "You know," she said from behind the counter, "we really should start asking for appointments before letting anyone just walk in." That one hit different, not just because of what she said, but how casually she said it, like she was talking about the weather. Darius turned halfway around. "Excuse me?" he asked quietly. She shrugged, still typing something into her computer. "I just meant we've had a lot of people browsing lately, and not all of them are real customers." He looked at her for a long moment. The room was silent again. Only Maya's tiny voice broke the tension. "Daddy, can we go home?" He nodded. "Yeah, baby, let's go." He didn't want to give them the satisfaction of seeing him angry. He'd been through worse. He knew what restraint looked like. But deep down, he could feel that old mix of anger and humiliation boiling. That helplessness that comes when people decide your worth before you even speak. Outside, the sun hit him hard. He blinked against the brightness, his chest rising and falling as he tried to catch his breath. Maya tugged on his sleeve. "Daddy, did we do something wrong?" That question nearly broke him. "No, sweetheart," he said softly. "You didn't do anything wrong." He bent down to fix her bow and forced a smile. "You hear me? You're perfect, okay?" She nodded, but her smile was smaller now. He looked through the glass window again. Inside, the employees had gone back to chatting, laughing. The young clerk was showing something on his phone to another worker. Darius could almost hear their voices, mocking, careless, safe behind the counter. He stood there for a moment longer, debating whether to just walk away or go back inside. His pride told him to let it go. But something else, something heavier, told him that if he didn't stand up this time, his daughter would remember this day for all the wrong reasons. He took a deep breath. "Wait here, Maya," he said gently, setting her down on the bench by the window. "I'll be right back, okay?" "Okay," she said, clutching her bunny. He walked back into the store. The door chime rang again, and the laughter stopped. Every eye turned toward him. "I just came to say something," he said, his voice steady but low. "You didn't have to treat us like that. My daughter was excited, that's all. You could have been kind." The older woman scoffed. "Sir, I don't think you understand how retail works." Darius's jaw tightened. "No," he said, "I understand exactly how people work." He turned toward the exit again, hands trembling slightly. He could feel his pulse in his ears, but he kept his back straight. He'd made it to the door when the young man muttered under his breath, "Guess that's one way to get attention." That time, Darius stopped cold. He didn't turn around. Not yet. He just stood there, staring at the glass reflection of his own tired face. For a second, he almost said something he'd regret. Almost. But before a single word could leave his mouth, a deeper voice echoed from the back of the store. "Everything okay out here?" The voice was calm but carried authority, the kind that makes people stop talking without knowing why. Everyone in the store turned toward the back. A tall man in his 50s stepped out from behind a half-open office door. His suit was sharp, but there was something grounded in his presence. Not just money, but experience. He had a short salt and pepper beard and eyes that looked like they'd seen a lot of life. It was Mr. Raymond Blake, the store owner. The young clerk straightened immediately. "Everything's fine, sir," he said quickly. "We were just—" Mr. Blake's gaze moved past him to Darius, who was standing by the door, one hand on the glass. "Were you just insulting a customer?" he asked quietly. The room went still. The clerk blinked, his confidence faltering. "No, sir, not at all." He was just leaving. Mr. Blake tilted his head slightly. "Is that true?" Darius hesitated. He wasn't sure if saying anything would make things better or worse. "I was," he said finally. "But doesn't seem like you've got a very friendly crew here." The older woman huffed. "Sir, this man came in asking for an expensive piece we both know he wasn't planning to buy." "We were simply being realistic." Mr. Blake's jaw tightened. He took a slow breath, then looked back at Darius. "And your name?" "Darius Holt," he said. Something shifted in Mr. Blake's expression. Just a flicker, gone almost as quickly as it appeared. "Holt," he repeated softly as if trying to remember where he'd heard it before. He walked closer, stopping a few feet away. "You look familiar. Have we met?" Darius shook his head. "Don't think so, sir." Mr. Blake studied him for a long moment. Then, with a calm that made everyone uneasy, he turned to his staff. "Go on, all of you. I'll handle this." The employees exchanged glances but obeyed. The young man muttered something under his breath as he walked off, but one look from Mr. Blake shut him down. Now it was just the two of them, the painter and the owner, standing in a store that suddenly felt smaller. Mr. Blake spoke first. "You said your name was Holt. You do construction?" "Painting mostly," Darius replied. "Residential, sometimes commercial." The older man nodded slowly. "You ever do work near Mount Pleasant? There was a bad rainstorm last year. You wouldn't happen to be the guy who stopped to help a car stuck under the bridge, would you?" Darius frowned, thinking. "Yeah, a kid's car broke down in the flooding. I pulled over and helped push him out before the water rose too high. Why?" The faintest smile touched Mr. Blake's face. "That kid was my son." Darius blinked. "Your son?" "Jacob Blake. He told me about a man who helped him that night. Said he tried to pay you, but you wouldn't take a dime. That you said, 'Good people help when they can.'" Darius exhaled, remembering. "I didn't know who he was." "Just did what anyone would have done." Mr. Blake's eyes softened. "Not everyone would have done that, Mr. Holt." The silence that followed was thick, not with tension, but with realization. Behind the counter, the same saleswoman peeked out from the office doorway, suddenly aware that she might have just embarrassed the man who'd saved her boss's son. Mr. Blake finally spoke again. "Wait right here, please." He disappeared into the back for a moment. Darius stood awkwardly, unsure of what to expect. Through the glass, he could see Maya still sitting on the bench, swinging her legs, watching birds flutter across the street. When Mr. Blake returned, he was holding a small white box in his hand. He placed it gently on the counter and said, "This one's for her." Darius frowned. "Sir, I can't." Mr. Blake raised a hand. "You already did more than enough." The saleswoman stepped forward, eyes wide, unsure what to say. Mr. Blake didn't even look at her. "Apologize to this man and his daughter," he said firmly. She swallowed hard. I'm sorry, sir. I really am." Darius nodded, still processing what was happening, but what Mr. Blake said next would leave everyone in that store speechless. Mr. Blake's eyes moved from Darius to the rest of the staff, then to the small group of customers pretending not to stare. His voice dropped lower, but it carried the kind of weight that didn't need volume. "You all laughed at this man," he said. "You judged him without knowing a single thing about who he is." No one spoke. The air was thick with shame. Mr. Blake gestured toward Darius. "This man risked his own safety to help my son when his car was stuck in a flooded underpass. He didn't ask for money. He didn't even give his name. He just made sure my boy got home safe. And now, months later, he walks into my store with his daughter, and you treat him like this?" The older woman behind the register opened her mouth, but Mr. Blake cut her off with a simple hand gesture. No excuses. Not one. Darius stood there, still unsure what to say. Part of him wanted to leave. Part of him wanted to make sure Maya got the bracelet she'd dreamed about, and part of him couldn't quite believe any of this was real. Finally, he cleared his throat. "Sir, I didn't do it for any kind of reward." "You don't owe me." "I know," Mr. Blake said softly. "That's exactly why you deserve it." He picked up the small white box and walked outside with Darius, the entire store watching in silence. Maya looked up from the bench and smiled as her dad stepped out. "Hey, baby," Darius said gently. "You remember the nice bracelet you wanted?" She nodded eagerly. Mr. Blake knelt beside her, his expensive suit brushing the pavement. "Hi, sweetheart," he said kindly. "Your dad helped my family a while back. I think it's only right that we help him make his little girl smile today." He opened the box, revealing the gold bracelet, the same one she had pressed her face against the glass to see weeks ago. Maya gasped, covering her mouth with both hands. "It's for me?" she whispered. Mr. Blake nodded. "It's for you." Her small hands trembled as he fastened it around her wrist. "Thank you, mister," she said. He smiled. "You thank your dad. He's the real hero here." Darius blinked hard, swallowing the lump in his throat. "I really don't know what to say," he murmured. Mr. Blake stood. "Just keep being who you are. That's enough." From inside the store, the young clerk and the saleswoman stood by the door, guilt written all over their faces. They watched as the little girl held up her wrist, showing off the bracelet that now glimmered in the afternoon sun. Mr. Blake turned to them. "Next time someone walks in, you treat them with respect first, and judgment never." The clerk nodded, his face pale. "Yes, sir." Mr. Blake looked back at Darius. "You work around here often?" Darius nodded. "Mostly small projects, houses, offices, whatever pays the bills." "Come by next week," Mr. Blake said. "We're remodeling the upstairs office. I'd like you to take the job. Full rate." Darius's eyes widened. "You don't have to do that." "I know," Mr. Blake replied with a half smile, "but sometimes doing what we don't have to is exactly what makes us human." The two men shook hands. Maya tugged on her dad's sleeve, proudly showing off her new bracelet. "Daddy, it fits perfect," she said. Darius smiled at her, a real smile, the kind that carried relief and gratitude. "Yeah, baby," he said quietly. "It really does." Mr. Blake watched them walk toward their car, then turned back to his staff, his voice steady. "That man walked in here poor, but he left richer than most people I know." But for Darius, the real wealth wasn't in gold. It was in the lesson his daughter had just learned about kindness and respect. The drive home was quiet at first. The afternoon sun was fading, painting the Charleston skyline in soft orange light. Maya sat in the back seat, her small hand resting on her new bracelet, twisting it so it caught the sun. Darius kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror. Every now and then, he caught her smiling. A real, unfiltered smile that kids wear when the world still feels good. "You like it?" he asked softly. "I love it," she said, beaming. "The shiny man said it was for me." He chuckled. "Yeah, that's Mr. Blake. He's a good man." Maya tilted her head. Why did those people in the store look mad at us? The question came out so innocent it stung. Darius's fingers tightened on the steering wheel. He took a slow breath before answering. "Sometimes, baby, people look at others and think they already know their story. But they don't. And when they do that, they miss the truth." She blinked, processing his words. "Like, they didn't know you helped the man's son?" He smiled. "Exactly." She nodded, staring out the window. "You think they'll be nicer next time?" Darius thought about that, about the stares, the whispers, the laughter that still echoed faintly in his mind. But then he remembered Mr. Blake, kneeling on the sidewalk, putting the bracelet on her wrist like it was the most natural thing in the world. "I think they learned something today," he said finally, "and that's what matters." They stopped at a red light. A group of teenagers crossed the street, laughing and sharing fries from a paper bag. Darius watched them, then looked at his daughter again. So small, so trusting. He thought about how close he came to leaving that store without saying a word, how he almost let that moment pass, how many times in his life he'd stayed quiet just to keep the peace. But not today. Today, his daughter saw him stand tall, not with anger, not with pride, but with dignity. He glanced back once more. Maya was asleep now, her tiny bracelet glinting under the passing streetlights. He smiled. "You're gonna be okay, baby girl," he whispered. "Better than okay." When they pulled into their small driveway, the sky had turned deep blue. The porch light flickered weakly as Darius carried Maya inside. He laid her in bed, careful not to wake her, and sat beside her for a long time. He thought about Mr. Blake's words. Sometimes, doing what we don't have to is what makes us human. It echoed in his head like a quiet truth. He wasn't a man who cried easily, but tonight he felt his eyes burn. Not from sadness, from something else, gratitude, maybe, relief, pride. Downstairs, he poured himself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. His phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. "This is Raymond Blake. I meant what I said. Come by Monday morning about that job. And bring your little girl. I'd like to say hello properly." Darius stared at the message, smiling to himself. It wasn't about the job, really. It was about being seen. About someone finally looking past the surface and recognizing his worth. He picked up his phone again and typed a reply. "Thank you, sir. And thank you for showing them what real respect looks like." He hit send, then leaned back in his chair, staring at the quiet room. The world outside was still unfair, still messy, still full of people who judged too quickly. But tonight, something had shifted. In him, in that jewelry store, maybe even in the little girl asleep upstairs. But the real revelation wasn't about what happened in that store. It was about how one small act of kindness can echo louder than 1,000 words of hate. Monday morning came sooner than Darius expected. He woke up before dawn, just like always, but something felt different, lighter. For the first time in a long time, he wasn't just getting ready for another job. He was heading somewhere that might actually change things. He made breakfast quietly, scrambled eggs, toast, and orange juice. Maya sat at the table, swinging her legs, still half asleep. Her bracelet caught the soft morning light, and Darius couldn't help but smile every time he saw it. "You ready to go see your new friend, Mr. Blake?" he asked. Maya perked up instantly. "The shiny man?" Darius laughed. "Yeah, that's him." When they arrived at Lexington Jewelers, the same door chime rang, but this time it didn't sound cold. The air inside felt different. The laughter that once cut through him had been replaced with quiet respect. The young clerk from before straightened up immediately when he saw them. "Good morning, Mr. Holt," he said, voice polite but awkward. "Mr. Blake is expecting you." Darius nodded and smiled faintly. "Thank you." He noticed the same older woman who had mocked him before rearranging jewelry in a display case. She looked up briefly, then down again, her face flushed. When Mr. Blake appeared from his office, he greeted them with a grin. "Darius, and you must be Maya. Come on in, both of you." The difference in tone was night and day. No tension, no forced politeness, just warmth. Inside the office, Mr. Blake offered them a seat. "So," he said, leaning back, "I thought about what you said the other day, about people assuming too much. I've been doing this for 30 years, and it still amazes me how fast folks make up their minds about someone." Darius nodded slowly. "Yeah, happens a lot." Mr. Blake sighed. "It shouldn't. You know, my father started this store with one rule. Every customer deserves respect. Somewhere along the way, some of my people forgot that. That's on me." He paused, then smiled slightly. "But thanks to you, we're about to fix it." He turned his computer screen toward Darius, an email draft already open. It was addressed to all staff. The subject line read, "Company Policy Update, effective immediately." Mr. Blake looked proud. "Mandatory training, customer service, ethics, bias awareness. We're starting next week, and I'd like you to help us repaint the training room before then. Top floor, full pay." Darius blinked. "You serious?" "Dead serious," Mr. Blake said. "You deserve this, and frankly, I could use someone who takes pride in their work." Maya grinned. "Daddy's really good at painting." Mr. Blake chuckled. "Then we've got the best man for the job." Darius smiled, but inside, something else was happening. Something deeper. For once, he felt seen not as a worker, not as a single dad just trying to survive, but as a man of worth. As they stood to leave, the young clerk approached them, nervously holding a small paper bag. "Sir, I wanted to say I'm sorry too. The way we treated you wasn't right." Darius studied him for a second, then nodded. "Takes a real man to admit that. Thank you." He handed the bag to Maya. "It's just a cleaning cloth for your bracelet. I thought you might want to keep it shiny." She smiled. "Thank you, mister." The young man smiled back, genuinely this time. As Darius and Maya stepped outside, a cool breeze swept through the street. The same sunlight that once exposed judgment now felt like it was washing it away. Mr. Blake walked them to their car and said, "You changed more than you know, Darius. You didn't just stand up for yourself. You reminded people what decency looks like." Darius nodded. "Guess we both learned something." They shook hands once more. Then Maya waved from the car window, her bracelet sparkling in the light. Mr. Blake waved back, smiling. "You take care of that bracelet, young lady." "I will," she shouted as they drove off. But as they turned the corner, Mr. Blake stood there for a while, realizing that sometimes the people who walk into your life by accident end up teaching you the lessons you should have known all along. That night, after Maya had gone to bed, Darius sat outside on the porch. The air was cool, and the sound of crickets filled the silence. He leaned back in his old chair, the kind that creaked every time he moved, and thought about the last few days. It all played in his mind like a film he couldn't quite believe he'd lived through. The stares, the laughter, the humiliation, and then the unexpected grace that followed. He looked down at his hands, the same ones that had painted walls for years, scraped and calloused, but steady. Those hands had built a living, held his daughter, and somehow, without meaning to, changed a room full of people. It was strange how life worked. Sometimes it only took a few minutes, one choice, one act, one moment of standing your ground, to remind the world that dignity doesn't come with a price tag. He smiled to himself. The bracelet on Maya's wrist wasn't just a piece of jewelry anymore. It had become something else. A symbol of everything that day had taught them both. The porch light flickered again, and Darius chuckled quietly. He made a mental note to fix it the next morning. Then he took out his phone and scrolled through the messages. One stood out. Another text from Mr. Blake. "Thank you again. You didn't just help my son that night. You helped me see the kind of man I want to be." Darius stared at the message, a lump rising in his throat. For so long, he had lived believing that his worth had to be proven, earned, justified. But now he realized something else. Worth doesn't need to be proven. It just needs to be remembered. He set the phone down, took a deep breath, and whispered into the quiet night, "Thank you." A week later, he started repainting the upstairs office at Lexington Jewelers. The same young clerk and saleswoman passed him every morning, each offering small smiles or a cup of coffee. It wasn't about pity, it was about respect. They'd learned. He could feel it. Sometimes, during his lunch breaks, Mr. Blake would come upstairs to chat. They'd talk about work, family, and how strange it was that something as small as a gold bracelet could bring people together. One afternoon, Mr. Blake looked out the window and said, "You know, my dad used to tell me that money can open doors, but character keeps them open." I think I forgot that for a while Darius wiped his hands with a rag, nodded slowly, and said, "It's easy to forget when everything looks perfect on the outside." Mr. Blake smiled. "You're right. But sometimes, it takes someone who's not supposed to fit in to remind us what really matters." Darius didn't say anything. He didn't have to. The silence between them said enough. When the job was finished, Mr. Blake handed him a check, but also something else, a folded card. Inside was a simple message: "You helped paint more than these walls." That line stayed with him for a long time. That evening, as Darius drove home with Maya singing softly in the back seat, he realized how far they'd come. Not just in miles, but in spirit. He looked at her bracelet glinting in the sunset and thought about all the people out there who carried quiet strength, who worked hard, loved deeply, and asked for nothing but respect. He hoped their story would remind others of something simple but powerful. That how we treat people when no one's watching says more about us than anything else ever will. And maybe, just maybe, the next time someone like Darius Holt walks into a room, instead of judgment, they'll be met with kindness. Because in the end, the smallest act of respect can change a day, and sometimes it can change a life. If this story moved you, share it with someone who needs a reminder that kindness still matters, because the world changes one good heart at a time.